Good afternoon, everyone. I'm Emily LeFevers from the Miami University Alumni Association. As a part of our webinar series this afternoon, we have the pleasure of hearing from Dr. Patrick Haney and Amanda Grandjean. Dr. Haney graduated with his bachelor's in political science from Ohio State in 1988 before earning his PhD from Indiana University. Now a professor of political science and associate dean for the College of Arts and Science, Haney is a prolific author and educator who earned Miami's Distinguished Scholar honor for 2007-2008 and the William Holmes McGuffey Award from the University Advancement in 2020. Haney remains engaged with Miami's wide network of alumni, taking time to host courses at both Alumni Weekend and Winter College, and also for our webinar series. And he is active with Miami's Janus Forum, which provides a place for members of the community to come together and discuss opposing views freely and passionately. So welcome to Dr. Haney and Mandy this afternoon. Thank you for taking the time to join us. So there were questions that were collected during registration, and Mandy will address some of these throughout the webinar this afternoon. You'll also have the option to ask questions during the webinar by clicking the Ask a Question button on the bottom of your screen. Please note, in the interest of time, we may not be able to get to every question. Today's webinar will last about an hour, including the presentation and time for question and answers. And I also wanted to mention that this webinar was put together by our Columbus Alumni Chapter, so thank you to them for organizing this. And with that, I will turn it over to Dr. Haney to get us started.
Great, thanks, Emily. And Mandy, thank you very much for doing this. And thanks to everybody for tuning in. I grew up in Columbus, so bummed that we're not there together in person. I'm here in my office in Oxford where it's like 1,000 degrees outside, but as you might expect, over air conditioned inside the office. So, but thank you very much for doing this. Let me give you a proper introduction. So Amanda Grandjean is the Director of Elections and Deputy Assistant Secretary of State for the state of Ohio, and Secretary of State Frank LaRose. She's a member of the National Association of Election Directors, the National Association of Secretaries of State, the Election Assistance Commission, Standards Board, the Electronic Registration Information Center, and the Bipartisan Policy Center's Election Task Force. Prior to her position in the LaRose administration, Mandy served as an attorney at Bricker and Eckler in Columbus, where she focused on election law, campaign finance, and public policy, ballot initiatives, ethics and compliance, and government affairs. Before joining Bricker, she had worked inside as an intern for Speaker Boehner's office, as well as, I think during her time at Miami, she served as a media liaison for the U.S. Embassy of the Republic of Iraq, and also was a legal intern with Franklin County Prosecutor's Office. She's a graduate of Miami University magna cum laude. She was Phi Beta Kappa in journalism and political science, and also a member of the MAC Championship women's swim and dive team. She graduated with honors from Ohio State University's Moritz College of Law, was a member of the Law Journal, and sort of prescient for where she would end up in her career. A symposium that she was the editor of, she hosted the 2015 Ohio State Law Journal Symposium on History and the Future of Election Law. She's also a great and loyal alum to Miami and to the Department of Political Science and the pre-law program. She's a member of Miami's Women in Law and Leadership Committee, and Ohio Women in Government, and graduate of the Joanne Davidson Ohio Leadership Institute. She was a member of our pre-law alumni advisory board, and in a great event, she was one of Miami's 18 of 9 award winners in 2019 that recognizes outstanding recent graduates. That's a mouthful. Thank you so much for being here, Andy. I really appreciate it.
You basically can sum it up for you in one sentence. A huge nerd is really what it comes down to.
Well, I don't know about that, but kind of unpack some of that for us. Will you talk a little bit about about your time at Miami, memories that you might have, things that were really important to you, and also about that choice of heading to law school, why right away, why Ohio State, and where this interest in election law really came from. Could you?
Yeah, absolutely. So it's funny. I was having this conversation with someone a couple weeks ago, and kind of reflecting on why I picked to go to school at Miami. I was swimming, and I was being recruited for swimming in high school, and it's an intense like recruiting process. And so I went to some of the Pennsylvania schools for official visits, like UPenn, Lehigh, Villanova. I took an official visit to Ohio State. I left 2 days early because I hated it so much, which is hilarious that I ended up going to law school at Ohio State. And I, of course, took an official visit to Miami. And it's hard to explain, and I'm certain some viewers who are alum, felt this feeling too. But when you step on campus for the first time, after never seeing it, it's gorgeous. It feels like home. There's just it's just an idyllic place. And for me, it just felt right. And I remember, my dad being like, well, why aren't you like looking at UPenn and Yale and all of these other schools? And I just was like, I don't want to go there. I'd rather go to Miami. So I picked Miami for its well-roundedness for me personally. I didn't necessarily want to be, as swimming goes, a big fish in a small pond, but I wanted to be somewhere in the middle where I felt challenged, but I also wasn't the worst person on the team. And then also academics were really important to me. And I remember, really looking into the political science department, really having great conversations with every professor that I met with on my official visit. And it just was a no-brainer after it. It was a no-brainer. So I signed my letter of intent, I think my junior year of high school. And so had my whole senior year to, think about Miami and get really excited for it. I actually met some of my future teammates who were also swimmers in the state of Ohio. One was at Upper Arlington and has been one of my best friends forever. We actually went to law school together too. So we swam together at Miami and then went to law school together. And I just can't, speak more highly of Miami. And I think the exact question that was posed to me is, do you regret not going to an Ivy League school? And my answer was no. I felt like I did. And I felt like academically I got individualized attention and mentoring, development. I had professors, you being the number one professor who challenged me to think outside the box and really think about things analytically, which was a huge skill that I needed for law school and ultimately being an attorney. And I can't speak more highly of the resources that Miami offers. And that doesn't stop when you graduate. It continues on. And, I consider, you and your wife, Karen, not only, mentors, but personal friends as well. And that is something that I just don't think you can get everywhere. And I had an absolutely incredible experience at Miami, but I was also, doing a lot of different things. I was swimming. I decided to double major. I got the journalism major, which was an incredible experience as well, because it developed writing skills. Poli-sci was also developing writing skills, but journalism was teaching me to write in a more formulaic way, which again, in hindsight, was a critical asset to writing in law school. Being a good writer, at least in my profession, is the most valuable thing that you can do. And it's a skill that I think is very, very underrated at this point. But good writing is hard to come by. And so I feel like I developed a lot of those skills and that prepared me really well for Miami. But I always knew I wanted to go to law school, and I did Inside Washington at Miami at, the encouragement of you and so many others in the journalism department. And that was an incredible experience as well. So you mentioned I interned for the Embassy of the Republic of Iraq and had an absolutely incredible experience in that internship, interned for Speaker Boehner after that. And when I was out in DC, everyone was like, no, don't go to law school. We're just recovering from an economic crash. Like, there are no jobs and no one is paying. And why don't you just move to DC and become a lobbyist or work for a think tank or work on the Hill and, just start there. And for me, that was okay. But I knew that I would always want to go to law school. And I thought that if I move to DC and I start a career, it's going to be really, really, really hard to peel that away, that career away and actually making money or pretending to make money and then go to law school. So in cert, my junior year at Miami, an angel from the heavens, Maria Vitullo, is hired as the pre-law advisor at Miami, and she really took me under her wing and gave me incredible counsel and guidance about really the future of my career and whether or not it was a strategic and good move to go to law school right after college. And there was a big debate going on in my head. Do I work a couple years, save for money? I knew financially I would be paying for law school. Did I want to incur that amount of debt? Did I want to go to a cheaper school that was like lower ranked, or did I want to go to the best school that I got into? So she helped me through all of that. And again, just going back to the incredible resources that exist at Miami, when you're there and then after, Maria is also an incredible mentor and personal friend, outside of Miami. So I ultimately picked Ohio State. And that was a very strategic choice as well. I visited OSU. Maria took a bunch of people up, had a great visit, enjoyed it. And while I was there, I realized that they have an election law program. It's really election law at Moritz is what it's referred to. And they've developed and recruited, some of the nation's foremost scholars in election law at OSU. And I think I had tangentially known that, but I didn't realize at the time just how, unbelievable the resources there at Ohio State were. And it was the number one ranked school in Ohio, public school. I did get some scholarship and it just made sense. So go to Ohio State. And of course, 1L year, you're just dying. And trying to figure it out while all of your family assumes that you're already a lawyer and asking you all of these questions and you have no idea what you're talking about. I still don't know what I'm talking about, but I pretend that I know what I'm talking about. And 2L year is really when you can dive in to, a specialty, give or take. But 1L year is so stressful because if you want to go the firm route, you need to just crush your grades, really. It's not fair. And I'm not justifying the system, but it just is the best advice I ever got in law school is a 3L took me aside and said, I'm just going to give it to you straight. Don't get it twisted. People will tell you your grades don't matter. Your first semester of law school, they actually mean everything. And so I then lived at the library from that conversation onward. And I did well. And, after you finish your first year and you get those grades back, that's when you're starting to apply for your second year summer. So you're doing what's called OCIs or on-campus interviews. And so I'm spamming my resume, applying to every firm in the state and otherwise, and just trying to figure it out, right? I mean, part of it is, you're in a culture that's, pushing you towards a firm. And I think that there's, pros and cons to that. But after your 1L summer, you're not only interviewing for your 2L summer while you don't know anything about your life or really the law. And you're also trying to find an internship for your 1L summer. Because at least in post crash of 2008, firms really condensed their budgets for summer associates and weren't doing 1L summer associates really anymore. So I ended up working at the Franklin County Prosecutor's Office under Ron O'Brien, and that was a tremendous experience. Again, I didn't necessarily know if I wanted to go into criminal law, but I was writing. I was getting repetition with legal writing. I was getting repetition with attorneys, with prosecutors, analyzing the law. Criminal law is very fact-based and it's very statutory. So it was a very good exercise for me that entire summer, and I got paid. So it was, it was great. I was thrilled. But as I'm going through OCIs, I'm interviewing, with all of the major firms in Ohio. I think I knew I wanted to stay in Ohio, and wanted to at least, because once you pick where you're doing your second summer, that's basically where you're taking the bar exam. And so that is a huge commitment. Again, law school just speeds everything up. You have to make major life decisions, really quickly. But I interviewed with a firm called Bricker and Eckler, and had a good interview. With OCIs, they come to Moritz. You do like a round robin, and then you actually, if they like you, you go back to the firm a separate day, and you spend the whole day there. And I remember interviewing with Kurt Tunnel, who was the managing partner and ended up being my, the head of my ultimate practice group. And he was just the sweetest man, smartest. He was George Voinovich's chief legal counsel. We just immediately clicked. And he was like, Mandy, what do you really want to do? And I was like, this is going to sound crazy. And this is probably going to get me eliminated from the consideration of this firm. But I think I want to practice election law. And he was like taken aback. And I was like, yep, I'm out. I'm definitely eliminated from this firm.
Yeah.
And he looks at me and he goes, Mandy, we do that here. We do a lot of that here. And I was like, really? And he was like, no, we that's a lot of what we do. And I was like, great. So anyways, ultimately they gave me an offer. I accepted that offer. And I had the best experience in my summer associate summer after my 2L year. And I was immediately in election law. It is so rare, as if any other attorneys, are listening, you can understand what I'm saying. You never end up where in the area that you want to end up. Sometimes it's beyond your control. I mean, in this economy, and again, post 08-09 economy, firms were just placing people based on numbers. It wasn't, hey, what do you want to do? It was, you have a brain, you can write, you're in construction. It wasn't, they tried to take into consideration what you wanted, but it's a numbers game. It's all about economics. But my path was not that. And I am so grateful for that. And I got incredible experience. And so, they brought me back for my third year of law school. I was actually working like 40 hours a week there, which is really rare because we were in a mandamus action, which is really where all election law is. And so as a third year law student, I was helping on briefs to the Ohio Supreme Court. I mean, I just got incredible experience so quickly. And I had great mentors, and Kurt was not only an incredible, human being, but just an absolutely incredible lawyer and mentor. So I couldn't be more thankful for my experiences and everything that I learned, while I was at Bricker. So I'm there so I passed the bar in 2016, and that was the biggest relief of all time. There's nothing like finding out that you passed the bar exam. I am so superstitious. I couldn't even look at the results. My poor roommate had to look at the results for me and tell me that I had passed. Like, am I a jerk or what, that I put her in that position?
Oh, and for people that don't know, right? So now I think they probably used to mail the stuff to you, but the idea is they just post a list of everyone who passed the test, right?
Right.
And that's how you find out. You get on the internet and your name is either on it or it's not on it.
And it's not like a private list where you search your name. It's a public list. Yeah. And you know that everybody that knows you is looking at that list. Yeah. So anyways, I put her in the horrendous position of having to tell me if I passed the bar exam or not. Yeah. Thankfully, she told me that I passed. And so I, was at Bricker. My summer associate year was 2015. And then I, started as an attorney in 2016. And then I was there through 2018, or really January of 2019. And so I exclusively did campaign finance election law, so major litigation in front of the Supreme Court on different ballot initiatives, advising candidates, political parties, corporations, on the electoral process, and answering any legal questions and issues that arose in that. And then I also did a little bit of government affairs work. And so, some public policy for clients. And that was not, election law specific. It could have been any issue related to insurance, life insurance, any public policy issues. So I was over at the State House from time to time advocating on behalf of our clients on why the law needed to be changed. So that was a great experience too. I had no lobbying experience whatsoever. I had, interned for Speaker Boehner and we were kind of getting by as like, that was my, government experience. But otherwise I was just a major nerd that could kind of have a conversation with people. And so we're, across the street, you get to know people, and really we were, general counsel to the Ohio Republican Party as well. And so I was, advising on a variety of different legal and campaign finance issues and handling litigation that would come, on behalf of the client. So great experience, not from Columbus originally. So really got immersed into the Capitol Square environment quickly, based on my practice area, and learned a lot. Learned a ton. I mean, a ton very, very quickly. And I really was not super engaged on campaigns at all because I was advising them. So that was like work for me. I wasn't really ever the person that was walking in parades or anything like that. I just was a lawyer. But I had met then Senator LaRose a couple of times. And I think we had worked on a bill. I can't even remember the topic. It had something to do with car titles, I think. Anyways, some random topic, but he had also known that I was very developing an expertise in campaign finance law. And so he had, we had just had anecdotal conversations about campaign finance, public policy, and what my thoughts were on, dark money and PACs and super PACs and 501c3s, 501c4s, sixes, what have you. So we're just having anecdotal conversations and I'm like, oh, this is great. I'm talking to Senator LaRose. He's a nice, smart, thoughtful guy. Have a nice day. And then it was November and October of 2018, and I was running election day war room operations on the legal side for the Ohio Republican Party. And so, any legal issues that were coming in, triaging those like in the field on election day. Mm-hmm. And I'm sure you recall this, but Republicans won statewide, every state office in 2018. And then 2 days after the election, I got a call from Secretary-elect LaRose asking, me if I wanted to be a part of his senior team. And I was actually not even in the state at that point. I was like, I'm traveling for a little bit, taking a deep breath. And I was like, wow, okay. Didn't see this coming at all. And so of course I, am very grateful for the opportunity, but like any good lawyer, I need to think about this, process it, sure. Contact my mentors, see what they think, also what is this role? I don't know. And little did I know in November of 2018, what the next 2 years, 2.5 years, had to offer. So ultimately, I remember calling you. I remember calling Karen. I remember calling Kurt. I remember calling, people that I trusted the most. I remember talking to Maria and, all of my entire network at Miami to say, what should I do? I was 28 at the time, and I had no idea, what this meant. So spoiler alert, I obviously accept the position and understand what the position, actually entails. And it was to be the director of elections and deputy assistant secretary of state. And what that meant is, Secretary LaRose was entrusting me to operate and manage and oversee the entire election and campaign finance process in the state of Ohio. So I was like, okay, it's a big job. We have a presidential election. I have a year to get it together. And then, by the way, COVID, global pandemic. So yeah, that's kind of bringing you up to speed of current day and my path. But it is the biggest honor of my lifetime to be able to serve the voters of the state of Ohio, and to work for Merle Madrid and Frank LaRose. I can't, imagine working for any other elected official who, cares more about voters in the state of Ohio and our democracy than those two. But it's a privilege. It is not an easy privilege. It's not an easy job, but it is the opportunity and honor of a lifetime.
Well, I want to get into some of those policy issues too, and running an election in the middle of a pandemic, and not just any election, either presidential election, and not just any presidential election, one in a battleground state. But I don't want to lose track of one of the other sort of the stories of the past. So make sure I remember this right. So your dad, though, was a football player, right? Played at Kent.
Yeah, the Naval Academy for 2 years.
Naval Academy and in Kent, and he's in the Hall of Fame at Kent, right?
Yes.
So which pill was more difficult to swallow for someone in Kent's Football Hall of Fame, that you went to Miami or that you went to Ohio State?
So that's a tough question. I will tell you his reaction to me choosing Miami, because he was really pushing me to like Pennsylvania. Like he was like, you need to really go check out like some of these PA schools. And he was like, Mandy, I'm going to tell you one thing about Miami. He goes, when I played football at Miami, they were the only school in Ohio where the girls were wearing fur coats to the football games. And he was like, of course my daughter would go there. Like, of course. Yeah. And so that was just always a funny anecdote that he would share. But OSU, it's funny, like he had like a love, he will always root for OSU, but it's definitely a love-hate relationship for sure. But he's super proud of me and OSU. So he sucks it up. I take him to some football games.
Yeah. Well, I remember seeing them at, your graduation, and I mean, your folks couldn't have been more proud. And of course then, Brock worked for us in the department too. And, we lost your sister to Denison, I think, right?
I know. Yeah. You did lose her to Denison, but that was the right choice for her.
Yeah, which is the most important thing, right? Right fit. That's what's most important. So, all right. So let's get into the job a little bit. So not just, any election, a presidential election, battleground state, you're coming out, remember too, of some of the things that were going on in 2016, especially with the Russians and disinformation. You're worried about hacking. When you start to get into the job, you also realize that it's not like you personally are running them all. There's these 88 counties and all these things are being done, and they're not all really at the same technology level. So how does that work?
How much time do you have? So I knew that, right? I knew that it would not be me personally putting ballots into the scanner. It would not be me tabulating votes. It would not be me personally conducting an audit. Ohio is a decentralized state. And we are in the minority, actually, of states in the United States that are decentralized. And bonus, most people don't know this, we're also bottom up. Okay, what does that mean? A lot of people don't understand what this means. In Ohio, every single county can choose their voting equipment, can choose their voter registration vendor, and has, autonomy really to do so. And that means I have very little control, like very little control over data, over, really anything. The Secretary of State's office, we set the regulations, we write the directives, we basically make the rules, in compliance with Ohio law. What we don't do is everything else. And so that was the really tough part. It's, you're taking all of the hits and the bullets, but you really don't have a ton of control. And so that was I knew that, but I didn't know how difficult that would make my job, because I have to consider, if you've gone to one county or, have seen one county from an elections perspective, you've seen one county. That's it. They are completely different, from the e-poll books that they use, from their voter registration systems to the voting equipment that they use.
And just to pause on that point for a minute. So the technology too that they're using, a lot of the stuff, I assume, dates back to following the 2000 election and the Help Americans Vote Act, the HAVA Act coming out of that poured some resources into states to start buying things. But in Ohio, right, people bought all kinds of different stuff and not all of it was secure. And
so a couple of clarifying points on that. So actually, to, I guess, brag about then Senator LaRose, who shepherded a bill through the General Assembly to provide, it's called the Voting Equipment Acquisition Project, is really it, that provided, hundreds of millions of dollars to the counties to procure new voting equipment, just in the wake of 2000. So we are actually just at the tail end of that project. It started in the Husted administration and then carried over to our administration. But yeah, those were state dollars that were being used so that voting equipment new voting equipment could be purchased in the state of Ohio. And one other point, there is a board that I am very involved with. It's called the Board of Voting Machine Examiners. That is our state certification board. So anything, any voting equipment or e-poll book that is in use in the state of Ohio, not only has to be certified by the United States Elections Assistance Commission, but it also has to be certified by the Board of Voting Machine Examiners, which is a bipartisan board of local election officials in the state of Ohio. We staff that board at the Secretary of State's office. The Secretary is not a member of that board, but we staff the board, and in the event of any tie votes of the board, we break those tie votes. But so there is a certification, but no, technology. Think about Apple. Okay, think about our iPhones. Think about any technology that you use. It's like a car. The minute that you get it, it depreciates. It's basically outdated the second that you get it. And so to keep up with that, from a security perspective, is paramount. And from a functionality perspective. So one of the first things we did when we came into office was laser focus in 2019 on security, both physical and cyber. And going back to, your statement about not having control of anything, the one thing I do have control of and what I do on a daily basis is I write directives, which are, are legally binding policies on the 88 county boards of elections. So we were the first state in the country, really, really amazing accomplishment, to issue what we refer to as a security directive. And what we did in 2019 is we took round 2 of the Help America Vote Act dollars that we were given by the federal government, and we gave major grants to the counties attached to a massive directive. And in that directive, we required them to upgrade their entire IT infrastructure before the 2020 presidential primary election. And I can't underscore what a feat that was. Literally the state of Ohio is the most secure election infrastructure in the country. DHS immediately was like, this is revolutionary. Every We had Cisco who is a major player in the private sector in cybersecurity, into our office to tell us they have never seen anything like this. And we got it done. We got it done before the 2020 presidential election. And that was a huge project, but it was, the secretary's vision we knew Russia was, in our backyard post 2016. We knew that 2020 was going to be the most dramatic and monumental. And we didn't even know about COVID, right? We're only thinking about security. We're only thinking about the state of our democracy, heightened tensions. We were only thinking about that. But thank God we did it. Thank God. And the boards, we're asking 70, in some cases, like in 70 and 80-year-olds to become IT experts overnight.
Yep.
And we held their hands through all of it. We, had people in the field constantly, and we were getting everybody across the line, but it was a massive ask. And it wasn't an ask, it was a requirement. It was a legally binding requirement that they had to do. But it was the best decision we ever made, because now we are sitting here where every other, state is sitting here. And we can just continue to build upon the infrastructure that we already have. Because if we know anything about cybersecurity, if we know anything about an evolving threat vector in critical infrastructure, it's that the enemy is always evolving. And so we have to continue to harden our systems. Well, if you don't even have the foundation to harden, what do you do? So that was 2019. It was the security directive. And it was a massive undertaking.
And then when did the reality sort of hit that you were going to get to do this in the middle of a very dangerous pandemic?
That's a tough question. March of 2020 was the worst year, or the worst month of my professional career. It was extraordinarily challenging to simultaneously prepare for a presidential primary election in a pandemic, and then also hours before polls open, find out that we were in fact not going to have an election. So it was really difficult. Really, really, really difficult. And it was not only difficult, for our office, it was difficult for the 88 county boards of elections. We were in crisis. And COVID, our chief of staff always likes to break things down into like known knowns, known unknowns, unknown unknowns, right? And you just get more uncomfortable as things progress towards the unknown, right? And the uncontrollable. We were not in control of anything. And COVID just continued to evolve and change, right? Remember when we weren't wearing masks, and then all of a sudden the science is saying that we have to wear masks? So the ball just kept moving rapidly, constantly. And, us, people in a position of power, can barely, keep up with that, to change the policies immediately as the science is changing, as the statewide, policies are changing as well from the Department of Health and the CDC. So you're trying to keep up with that. But it was a crisis. March was a crisis. And, we got through it the best way that we could, but I never want to do that again, ever. I don't think anybody who works in elections would tell you that they ever want to do March of 2020. I don't care what state you were in. It was just hard. It was really hard. But of course, then, we got through that. The General Assembly issued a COVID bill that basically maps forward the path to finish the election. Because as you know, there was not in-person voting on March 17th. So the primary election was ultimately wrapped up on April 28th. And in-person voting was strictly limited to those with disabilities and the homeless. So if you could not, physically do an absentee ballot, or you had no other way to vote, you could go to your board of election on election day. But that was it. So it was, I mean, we were not only, because there was the personal side to COVID, right? Everybody was dealing with their own personal crises, right? I mean, my brother lost his job. I know a ton of people were dealing with unemployment. You're dealing with all of these personal things, and you're also like professionally in crisis, trying to lead the state toward, a path that is not only secure and accurate and fair, but protects not only voters, but also election officials from COVID-19. And by the way, remotely, like you
Right.
couldn't, and so that it just, the amount of challenges, I actually don't think I've reflected like recently on this because it's just too painful to go back down that path. But, we finished up in April, and, Secretary LaRose had, really a brilliant idea to hold what we referred to as the Ready for November task force. And what that meant is when the dust settled, and it never really settled, right? We got to a place where we knew that masks were mandatory. We kind of knew at least some rules surrounding COVID. The science wasn't changing as rapidly as it was in March and April. And when May rolled around, we felt like we were able to get, at least some actual written health guidance policies out there to the boards of elections and to voters. But we really came together with the leaders of the Association of Ohio Election Officials, and their leadership and the secretary formed a Ready for November task force. And the Ohio channel streamed every meeting. And what we did is we brought in leaders, like we brought in, health leader. We brought in local health leaders. We brought in the people from Cedar Point and Cedar Fair to talk about line management. We talked about basically crisis management from the perspective of if you had an angry voter, about a mask or whatever, how do you handle that? I mean, every single scenario that we could even remotely anticipate happening in November, we wanted to be prepared for, and we wanted it to be aired publicly so that the public could also know that we were preparing for these things at really the micromanagement level. So the Ready for November task force turned into 2 directives in the summer of 2020. And the first one was what we refer to internally as the CARES Directive. The federal government had it at this point, passed the CARES Act, and that included a lot of money for critical infrastructure, and elections is critical infrastructure. And so we were, again, in a HAVA type situation, having, this money, and we wanted to have a policy. So, we wrote the CARES Directive that included, more detail than I think has ever been put into a directive on planning for an election. Because now we were actually in a position of telling, the boards, this is exactly what you need to do. Because they had never done this in a pandemic, and we needed to lead on a lot of these issues. So we put everything in there from having backup paper poll books to e-poll books, because we knew that turnout was going to be, even in a pandemic, we knew that there was not going to be higher turnout than 2020. And there wasn't. It broke every record, in the book in November. So we put all of our election preparation policy into this directive, and that was a huge success. I don't know if you heard about Franklin County on election day, but actually their e-poll books went down at 5:30 a.m. on election day. And I got a call, in the command center at 5 a.m., around 5, I think it was like 46 on election day. Polls are opening, in minutes. And, our e-poll books are down. Okay, well, remember the CARES Directive? You have paper backup poll books. We're going to switch over to those right now. So we built contingency plan after contingency plan because we had to keep the ball rolling. Like this had to be executed as perfectly as possible, not only from a health perspective, but also from an election administration perspective. I mean, COVID changed the way that we do elections administration, not just in the state of Ohio, but nationwide. So we spent all spring and all summer thinking about that and putting it into a directive. Then we also issued another security directive. And this was really focused on physical security and a couple other cyber components, really more building off of our cyber infrastructure, but focusing on physical accessibility. So for folks with disabilities, and physical security. So securing the Board of Elections. Because at this point, again, I'm not sure if you remember, this was in the heat of many, many threats, not only to election officials, but things were heating up. And the climate, in the United States was intense. And so we issued that directive that required the boards to upgrade their physical security. We wanted to protect our people and we wanted to protect voters. We wanted to think about, I know it sounds crazy, but we wanted to think about terrorism. I mean, our senior staff was on the phone with Ohio Homeland Security, the FBI, DOJ, all of our federal and state security partners once a week leading up, all up to early voting. And those partnerships are rock solid. And I'm really, really grateful for those partnerships. So we built out so many things, and even just talking about it, I'm just so proud of not only, our team here at the Secretary of State's office, but every single local election official, because we not only asked them in 19 to become IT experts, now we're asking them to become physical security experts. We're asking them to become doctors. We're asking them to become lawyers. I mean, the pressure, that these people were under in a climate that was not thankful for them was extraordinarily challenging. And so I just can't, be more thankful and proud to work for them and work with them, because 2020 was a feat and we crushed it. They crushed it. Ohio led on everything. It was a fantastic election in November, but it was hard. It was not easy.
So I want to get to some of the sort of reforms they're going on in other states. And I know there's a bill in the Ohio General Assembly about, changes on how voting happens as we head to the next round of elections. But before we sort of get to that, one of our viewers asked if you could reflect just a little bit, sort of from a different angle on what's really surprised you, in a good way, about the job, or sort of what are those things, about the job that you just really are like, this is just so fun, this is so great, what's it sort of like during the day that really brings the smile to the face?
Honestly, even the hard stuff brings a smile to my face. I mean, it to know that you're, making decisions and crafting policy for 11 million people about, in my opinion, the most important rights. And I think the United States Supreme Court has said this. It's the right that every other right is based on, the right to vote. That is the best job I could ever imagine. Being able to help protect that, to make sure that Ohioans believe the results of their election and know that they are fair and accurate and secure, and know that, everything in the state of Ohio is done in a bipartisan manner and done in a secure manner. I mean, that will always bring a smile to my face. It might be hard, but it is the most rewarding work, that I could imagine. And I was able to I'm a lawyer every day. I mean, I'm using, I'm just writing the laws, the directives at this point. And I'm now the one that's sued, and have my own lawyers. But it's to be able to pull off what we pulled off, you peel everything back and to say, in all of this adversity, everything that was thrown, we came out on the other side, and we came out victorious and successful. And Ohio can be held up as a leader in the nation, that will always be, the best accomplishment. And I think the other part of my job that I love, and it's hard too, but every good thing is hard, is managing people and the relationships that you build. I went from being an associate at a law firm to managing 30 something people, in my division, and 88 county boards of elections. And that is really hard work, but it's super rewarding work. And you get to know people, and you get to, develop people and invest in people and learn from people and listen to people. And that's been really cool and really fun. And I feel like most people don't know this about elections in Ohio. A Republican and a Democrat work together every single day. And they are not far apart, they work together to get the job done. And if that doesn't give you faith in democracy, I don't know what does, because sometimes the loudest noises are seemingly the only noise, and that's just not true. So if you're feeling at all cynical about democracy, if you're feeling at all cynical about politics or the state of the United States, go to your local board of elections and meet the people that run elections. And I promise you, you will have your faith, right back, and why, this country is the greatest country in the world, and why democracy works.
Yeah. So mindful of the time here too, and I want to come back and ask you a couple of little sort of small world Oxford questions at the very end. But one of the other viewers asked about what's going on with some of these proposals. Well, some of them are laws now, new laws around the country about how voting will work. In most cases, those are laws that seem to be trimming, or the way that voting works around limiting early voting, or making it harder to absentee vote and things like that. And I think in a couple cases it's in the opposite direction. Ohio, there's a proposal in the Ohio General Assembly. It hasn't I think gone anywhere out of the House yet, that would change a lot of the ways that we might vote in the next election. Of course, there's also redistricting still to go before the next batch of elections. But I tried to look up the cases of voter fraud in Ohio, and it doesn't seem like voter fraud is a rampant crime in Ohio. I thought maybe only one nailed down case of voter fraud in the last election. And so, how do you say to people, that you kind of match up your sense of how strong the system was in 2020, and then so why this need to perhaps make it even harder for people to vote the next time around? I don't know if you or the Secretary's office sort of has a view on that bill that's in the General Assembly or not, but it does seem kind of odd, because it's not exactly a crime that seems to be spinning out of control, and yet a lot of states seem to be trying to crack down on how voting works.
So I think, I guess to back up and just disclaimer, I wouldn't be a good lawyer, is I am no expert. I'm no expert whatsoever in any other state's bill. And candidly, I'm not in the Ohio General Assembly either. And so I'm not necessarily an expert on, the proposals that are over there. I will tell you that the amount of mis and disinformation surrounding anything in elections, but, specifically legislation is just out of control. People are candidly too lazy to actually read a bill themselves. And so they just steal talking points from, either the right or left or whatever interest group, and they just put it out there. And again, going back to the loudest noises get the most attention. They're not right. They're just not right. And so I encourage anybody to look at a bill. I mean, literally, like, pull up the bill and look at it for yourself, because the amount of mis and disinformation out there is staggering. And informed voters inform voters. And you cannot be an informed voter unless you're actually reading legislation instead of just taking somebody's talking points. So I will, be a little fiery there, because I have very little tolerance for people. If they want to talk turkey, if they want to like show me a line, like a lot, like literally in a bill, if they want to say on line 292, it says X, Y, and Z, and we can have an academic, legal and educated conversation. I will do that at any time, with anyone. What I won't do is battle talking points. I won't do that.
Mm-hmm.
So, and I know that that's been a huge frustration in other states as well. Because a lot of times you're just fighting back against lies, on any side of the coin. So I just encourage anyone, before you get out there talking on social media, look at the bill itself and do your research. Don't be lazy, because you're just adding to the problem of mis and disinformation. And candidly, you're just helping Russia. I mean, that's really, at the end of the day, what you're doing. You're just helping our adversaries to degrade democracy, to continue, because this is the long game, guys. This is not a secret. I mean, in the wake of 2016, we have intelligence that suggests that this is the long game. The goal is to degrade the institution of democracy. And the way that you do that is you get people to believe that there's widespread voter suppression and there's widespread voter fraud. Neither are true. Neither.
Yeah.
So I think, to just empower people. You're all Miami grads, you're smart, you have, the ability to conduct research on your own, use that degree and make educated comments about, legislation. And I think that the heat has been so turned up that we can't talk about things rationally anymore. We can't talk about things objectively, right? Like, and scientifically, we have to speak about them with such passion. And I get it. I am probably the most passionate about elections and voting. So I totally get it. But we just have to be careful we're not playing into our enemy's hands with those passions, unless there is actually concrete information and research behind it. As for House Bill 294, the secretary did give proponent testimony to that. I believe it was 2 weeks ago. And, this is not a perfect bill. I don't think anybody would suggest that it's a perfect bill. The local election officials association, the Ohio Elections Official Association, are basically in the exact same position as the secretary is. There are a lot of good things in the bill, right? A lot of good things in the bill. There's automatic, or a verified voter registration modernization. So meaning that really modernizing the way that we do voter registration in the state of Ohio. That's a great thing. That's really important. There's online absentee ballot requests. Just like we have online voter registration in the state of Ohio, we would have online absentee ballot applications. Great things. There are, the use of an electronic copy of a utility bill as ID, clarifying that. I mean, there are a lot of good policies in the bill that are great. I think that there's, and the secretary said this in his proponent testimony, there's certainly things that can be improved upon, right? And more discussions, but that's the legislative process, right? And the secretary isn't a member of the General Assembly. Our job is to execute the laws that the General Assembly, writes. But to say that it is, eliminating hours for voting is just not true, So I think that Ohio already leads in, so many areas. I mean, like, for example, the state of Ohio has 11 or more days of early voting, whereas Kentucky, no, New Jersey, no, New York, no, So when you actually compare the state of Ohio to every other state, we have more expansive voter laws than, New York doesn't even have early voting. You know what I mean? It's pretty remarkable. But again, this is what facts do for you. So I think that there is a way I will credit actually the Secretary of State of Kentucky said this, and I kind of synthesize it in this, and I tweet about this a lot. Security and accessibility are not mutually exclusive, right? You can be secure and still be accessible. And I think that that's, the sweet spot. So that's kind of my spiel on public policy. Just be smart about it.
The teacher in me is the same thing. Go look it up, because it's actually not that hard to look these up. Hear a lot of talk about the bills in different states, and you go and read the news or you hear somebody talk about it, but you can pull the bill up. In the case of Ohio, it's the Ohio Election Security and Modernization Act. It's in the House, and we'll see what comes of it. In the meantime, how long until the midterms? You got the ticker going?
Yeah. Oh God. Do you know Frank LaRose? Heck yeah. He has a ticker going in every room. The election, the command center that, I operate, is just right across the hall from my office. And there's a massive countdown to early voting. Because again, in Ohio, you have 28 days of early voting. So you can vote for 28 days preceding the election, which is remarkable. So take advantage of it. Don't wait. Make a voting plan. We have 2 special congressional elections in August.
Yeah, that's right.
So we're getting ready for that.
Yeah. Wow. So we're just about out of time, and I think I actually know the answer to this question, but other people might not. So if we were doing this, of course, if we were in Columbus, we'd be in Columbus. But if we were here, where would we be going to lunch while you were here?
Oh man, that is tough. I mean, it depends on if I have to work afterwards. If I have,
interesting.
If I don't, this would be my ideal situation. Go to Brick Street, get a trash can, then go to Bagel and Deli, get a bagel, then go to Skipper's, get a beer tower and a basket of waffle fries, and I am in heaven.
Wow. I just want to make clear to any students listening that I have no idea what you just said. No idea. So, Mandy, thank you very much for spending time with us today, and the Columbus Alumni Chapter and Miami alums. I want to mention too, along the way, you're already hosting Miami interns, which I really appreciate. Part of this great network of Red Hawks that are always there to help when we call on you, and I really appreciate that. And also want to make clear that sky's the limit for where you're going, and I can't wait to see what comes next. So thank you very much, Mandy. I really appreciate it. And thanks, Emily, if you're still lurking there. I appreciate all your help setting this up today.
Of course. Thank you both so much. And thank you once again for everyone that joined us today, and for the Columbus chapter for setting this up. I invite you to check out our other webinars. They're free and open to all, and on our webinar site, alumlc.org/MiamiOH. Thank you again, Dr. Haney and Mandy, for today. Have a great rest of your afternoon, and love and honor.
Love and honor. Thank you.
Thanks, everybody.